eruv.org.il have published their proclamation not to fight beyond the 1967 borders as combat officers and soldiers in the Israeli army. And in one of their phrases, they said, "We shall no longer fight beyond the 1967 borders in order to dominate, expel, starve, and humiliate an entire people." End quote. I guess they're just a bunch of anti-Semites, aren't they? The Israeli peace movement had just recently put 120,000 people in the square in Tel Aviv. These refuseniks have faced jail. They're extraordinarily courageous. They made statements in their proclamation such as, "The territories are not Israel," that Israel does not belong there. 78% of Palestine is enough, I think they're thinking. And what else is important is that inside the U.S. government, there is the most serious reservations about a knee-jerk policy of support, which is characterized in the following manner. The Israeli government prime minister, I want to emphasize that, the Israeli government is the fifth most powerful military force in the world, arguably the second most modern. It has over 200 nuclear weapons, can wipe out the Middle East in a weekend. The disparity of power between the Israeli military machine and Palestinians fighting with stones and rifles probably is the broadest disparity of any struggle in the modern world today. The U.S. government, in the interests of the American, Palestinian, and Israeli people, has got to start thinking for itself. Inside the U.S. government and Congress, they know that is needed. Outside, they toe the party line. The Israeli prime minister comes to the U.S. as if he is a potentate. He meets with the White House, and anybody in the White House knows that he has the Congress on his side, overwhelmingly. And he goes to the Congress, and the Congress knows that he has the president on his side, overwhelmingly. As a result, there is no possibility that we can play the role of an arbitrator or a mediator when we have that kind of one-sided support, one-sided military assistance, one-side of aid programs, and diplomatic support. So if we're not credible as mediators, that conflict will continue to go on. Civilian lives will be lost on both sides, but a far greater proportion of innocent men, women, and children on the Palestinian side, lives will be destroyed. It also does something for our global credibility. There's something unseemly about a U.S. helicopter gunship allegedly suspecting a militant sleeping midnight in a room in an apartment house and blowing the apartment house apart, killing 27 civilians beside the militant, including 13 children. And from the White House, the comment is, "It was a troubling event." The Israeli Air Force officer who joined the refuseniks and spoke recently in Vermont gave the reason why he switched. He said one day, after a number of maneuvers, he asked his superior, after one of the gunships had blown up a car right in the middle of a populated street. He asked his superior officer, he said, "Would you have done that exact same thing in a crowded street in Tel Aviv if you had the same suspected car traveling down the road?" And the superior said, "Of course not." And his subordinate, refusenik to be, said, "Why not?" And what came forward was a torrent of racist characterization of the Palestinian people. I think it's time to open up wide-ranging and critical discussion on this subject without the burden of cheapening the currency of what once was a sacred phrase describing the devastation of the Jews under Nazi Germany. The overuse and dilution of the epithet anti-Semitic has stifled peoples, so they end up playing soccer against one another someday. So there's a two-state solution with a viable Palestinian state, control of its air, water, and boundaries. Or we continue this kind of censorious atmosphere, a paradox to be sure, where there's far more freedom in Israel, in all contexts, in all arenas, in all auditoriums, to freely discuss this issue than there is in the United States of America. And if there's continue going to be the use of the term anti-Semitic, I suggest even-handed use.
That's right. Yeah.
Both Jews and Arabs represent the great Semitic tribes. The Arab Semitic tribes are larger in number than the Jewish Semitic tribes. And if that word is going to be used, then it better be used whenever there is anti-Semitism against Jews and when there is anti-Semitism against Arabs, as there is. But I would much prefer not using these descriptions so it can be a free-for-all and intelligent discussion, and so that we can move this conflict to a settlement. It is an eminently resolvable conflict. Over 50% of the Israeli people know that a prerequisite to solving that problem is an independent Palestinian state. Over 2/3 of Americans of Jewish faith believe that. The only ethnic group that has a higher percent of support for independent Palestinian state are Arab Americans. The number two are Americans of the Jewish faith. That's not generally known by the likes of AIPAC and the lobbies in Washington. That is, it may be known, but it's not publicized very widely. And so a few weeks ago, the House of Representatives, by a vote of 400 and something to 9, supported the AIPAC resolution, which pledged to support the House of Representatives behind Sharon's latest strategy. And there was no mention whatsoever of an independent Palestinian state. And when some of the members were interviewed, they expressed severe private judgments, private reservations, but they felt they had no option but to support the resolution. That is not a free-thinking Congress. Politicians who express publicly their private judgments are freer, and they're more in tune with their own integrity than when they live a double life. One, about what they think should be done, and two, what their expedient political antennas say they have to do. And so I would urge all of us to converse more with our friends, and to have more forums such as these, in order to develop a more deliberative process, a more empirical process, and one that looks beyond the horizon and sees all the glorious benefits that can occur for the resolution of these conflicts and for the absorption by the federal government of a major and well-funded and consistent drive to wage peace instead of spending all our money in this area to prepare for war here and around the world. This imbalance between waging peace for disarmament, for arms control, for conflict aversion, for forestalling perils, for going to the basis of disruption and violence, such as dictatorships which we have supported over the years, such as destitution and poverty, disease and illiteracy, all of which can be confronted by U.S. scientific, technological, and humanitarian genius at levels of expenditures far less than what it costs to continue a bloated military budget that, without any major enemy left in the world, consumes 50 cents out of every dollar that the federal government spends on operating expenses today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We had invited Representative John Conn